Hello everybody, I'm Kate Cast, and welcome to our edition of Let's Talk About. Today, let's talk about 2021. As we welcome the year 2022 and silently hope it won't bring with it any more variants of a certain virus, there's also the natural impulse to look back on the year before, on achievements, experiences, struggles, and less introspectively, entertainment. Last year, I counted down my top 12 favorite pieces of entertainment from 2020, which was pretty fun to put together, so we're doing it again. But before you begin any list like this, you need to lay down some disclaimers. First, the only criteria for this list is that the entertainment in question has to have been released in 2021. Movies, new TV shows, new seasons of existing shows, and maybe a bonus or two. Second, the standard disclaimer that this is just my opinion. This is the entertainment I gravitated towards and what stuck with me. Your list will likely differ greatly from mine. In fact, I can almost guarantee that, so just take this list for what it is. My own subjective faves of the year, which is more important than usual this year because there was a lot of entertainment this year, like an overwhelming amount. With movie theaters opening back up, we basically crammed 2 years worth of blockbusters into one, and a lot of shows came back after very long hiatuses. With only 12 slots, there were a lot of tough cuts, so keep that in mind. Okay, I think we're good to go. Let's count down my top 12 favorite pieces of entertainment from 2021. But why top 12? Because like I said, there was a lot of great stuff out there this year. You really expected me to only pick 10? Let's start this list with number 12. Supergirl Season 6. About 4 years ago, I binged the first 2 seasons of Supergirl on Netflix, which was the entirety of the show at the time. That was my introduction to the DC Arrowverse. Since then, I have grown to love several other shows in this interconnected universe. That all started with The Girl of Steel, and this year is where that story came to a close. As sad as I was to hear the show was ending, I think they went out on a high note. For one, they recovered from having to wrap up their previous season's arc that was cut off because of the lockdown better than probably any of the other CW shows, so props there. But once the storyline for this season got going, it was pretty captivating. The best the show was made? Not necessarily. Personally, I'd say the show peaked at season 4, but there were a lot of cool storylines, character development and revelations, and well-crafted personal challenges that tied into life or death situations, which is really all I asked for from my superhero shows. From getting to see more of Kara when she was younger, to the team dealing with the pressure of being secretive public figures who make big choices that affect everyone they swear to protect, to pretty much everything with Kelly Olsen, which I'm sure to a lot of people was heavy-handed, because it kind of was, but I think they got the intent and emotion across well, and her transformation into her own version of Guardian was just fabulous. The only major thing I had against the final season is that the big threat of this season gets dealt with kind of anticlimactically. Don't get me wrong, they have an incredible fan service army to stop them, but the whole conflict gets resolved really quickly considering the build up to get to this point. Sorry guys, but DuckTales did the fan service army better in my opinion. But aside from that, the finale had me more emotional than I expected, honestly, with pretty much every character getting a curtain call, even the ones we haven't seen for a long time, and wrapping up Kara's story in a pretty satisfactory way if you ask me. She certainly got a better deal than poor Oliver did. I was sad to see the show go, but happy with how it left. While I know my journey with the Arrowverse is far from over, I'll always look back fondly on where that journey began. Number 11. Mitchells vs. the Machines. I'm sure I'm gonna get some pushback for this movie being so low on the list, but that's mostly because I was dragging my feet getting around to watching it. But I'm glad I finally found the time because, yeah, everything everyone said was true. Mitchells vs. the Machines is awesome. I think we should just have Phil Lord and Chris Miller involved in every anime movie from now on. They are batting 1,000 here. I remember when this movie was first being promoted, back when it was called Connected, a lot of people were annoyed with this being another story about how we live our lives behind screens and we should reject technology for the truly fulfilling connections in life. Yeah, good luck with that. And while there is some commentary about our over-reliance on it, there's more nuance to the topic than I expected, mostly by taking the concept of machines taking over the world to the highest extreme.
Let me guess, robot apocalypse.
Let me just say, the idea of turning a robot apocalypse story into a bonding opportunity for a distant dysfunctional family is a stroke of genius. Thankfully, despite how it might read on the tin, the movie doesn't ignore the connections and opportunities that can come with technology, or that the more rustic way is out of touch. Rather, it shows that genuine connections with other people come in compromise. One way isn't superior to the other, but you'll get the most out of experiencing both. No matter what method you use, that is the true nature of communication. The heart of this whole thing is its endearing main cast of the Mitchell family, including our lovable film-loving protagonist, Katie? Wait, that's her name? Oh my god, this girl is me. Wow, that is uncanny. There are not a lot of differences between me and this Katie. Except she went to college. The very unique animation art style immediately makes the movie distinct among the other animated films this year. The sporadic humor and animation work could have been agonizing if used incorrectly, but they find the right balance between over-the-top action and comedy and quieter moments for contemplation and processing events. And the characters do fall into familial stereotypes that could feel tired, but as the movie goes on, their relationships are tested, which reveals the depth and love each family member really has. It's trope-tastic, but feels real, if that makes sense. Mitchell's Versus the Machines deserves its title as one of the greats of this year, taking worn-out story ideas and making something refreshingly original with it, filled with the kind of heart that could resonate with viewers of all ages. To put it simply, in the words of my very on-the-nose animated counterpart, it is, without a doubt, cinema. Number 10. In the Heights. I honestly thought this movie was going to rank higher on this list, but as you'll soon see, this was a fantastic year for musicals, so even the greats had a lot of competition. Still, In the Heights is a triumph of a movie musical. Even with a lot of competition in its genre, it really stands out, transforming the neighborhood of Washington Heights into a lively backdrop for a fabulous musical, and translating the material and setting from stage to screen rather smoothly, with spectacular choreography and breathtakingly creative cinematography, adding John M. Chu to the short list of directors I would completely have faith in to direct a respectful movie musical. It certainly boosted my confidence in that Wicked movie they're apparently finally making. Yeah, I'll believe when I see a trailer. The cast has some amazing talent in it without the need for big names. The soundtrack is yet another work of written art by one Lin-Manuel Miranda. Paciência y Fe is one of the most magnificently composed film sequences of 2021, Fight Me, and the ever-persistent heart of the story shines until the very last note is played. And I mean the very last note. Don't forget, this movie has an end credit scene. To an extent, the movie does fall into that story trope that bothers me sometimes, where you don't need to strive for more than the home you come from, as that will really have what you're looking for. But luckily, the various subplots offer other views and goals on how to help your community by expanding your horizons rather than sticking to your hometown. That recognition of the variety and contributions really saved a trope that typically gets on my nerves. It's not the only solution, it's one of many, and honestly, that's really refreshing. In the Heights, in many respects, feels like a celebration of the movie musical, of underappreciated talent, of the Latino community, and of your own roots, whether they stay firmly planted or branch out to other opportunities. It's fantastic, and I hope it inspires future musicals to follow in its footsteps. Number 9. Infinity Train Book 4. Oof. How the mighty have fallen. The last two seasons of Infinity Train were the number one choice on my list last year, and the season we got this year doesn't even crack the top 75%. Now, this is not a slight against the season itself. Book 4 of Infinity Train had a lot of the trademark strains of the previous seasons. A plethora of creativity, expanding on the limitless potential of the setting, experimenting with the premise in unique and interesting ways, and introspective obstacles for the characters that can make an audience member with similar struggles really think. It also helps that this time we have two passengers as our protagonists, and they're so different that there's a good chance that the viewer would identify with at least one of them, which for a show like this is only a good thing. The experience of Book 4 was mostly soured by the fact that at the time of recording, this is the final season. Infinity Train, as of right now, is over. possibly forever, despite aggressive fan demand. Book 4 is a good season, a great one even, but after how much each season of Infinity Train was escalating the tension and upping the stakes, this felt much more like a cool down period. A lighter but still dramatic outing before we got to some truly big stories that may never come now, leaving the show on an underwhelming note that it was never intended to go out on. Book 4 of Infinity Train only showed how desperately we need a show like this on TV or on streaming right now. It's fantastical and authentic, wild and down to earth, exciting and utterly heartbreaking. All of which I go over extensively in my review of the season, by the way. Please go watch it. I worked really hard on it, and it got like no views. This show demands more love and attention. Please, for all that is holy in this world, hashtag finish Infinity Train. Number 8. Ted Lasso, Season 2. Hey, guess who was really late boarding the Ted Lasso hype train? If you're wondering why this show made the list this year and not last year, it's because I didn't see Season 1 until after that video was made. Because if you ask me, Ted Lasso didn't do a great job promoting itself. The premise didn't seem strong enough to fill an SNL sketch, and none of the promotional material did anything to convince me that this was a worthwhile show. But Ted Lasso became a case of gaining success through word of mouth. Once people saw it and were enraptured by its unexpected heart and sincerity, portrayed by its very lovable cast of characters, the rest was history. Ted Lasso became a phenomenon, being the optimistic ray of sunshine we desperately needed in 2020. As such, all eyes were on the show for Season 2, eager to see what the show would deliver next. Honestly, if Ted Lasso had just done more of the same for this second season, I think people would have been perfectly happy. And while there is a bit of it that's more of the same, and is just as heartfelt and amazing as before, it was clear pretty quickly that things were going to go farther than they had before in this season, and boy did they ever. Delivering the same wholesome, inspirational, melt-your-heart content while raising the stakes, exploring the characters, and creating a stronger emotional core. Not being afraid to talk about certain subjects that a lot of people find it difficult to talk about. Without spoiling anything, I'd consider the best episode of the season to be No Weddings and a Funeral, which aired right after the show swept the Emmys, and I think they should have given them another Emmy just for that episode. Save us all some time. Now that said, I didn't love everything they did. What they're doing with Nate is a good example, but I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt and see where they go with it. But Season 2 of Ted Lasso solidified that the show was not just a new trending hit, but had integrity and staying power, portraying some of the most emotional highs and lows I experienced on TV this year. I did not expect to be this emotionally invested in Ted Lasso of all things this time last year, but now I am ready for the show to make me laugh and cry and happy cry for hopefully many more seasons to come. Number 7. Only Murders in the Building. Steve Martin and Martin Short are perhaps two of the most recognizable comedic talents of our generation, seen everywhere from film to television to the stage. But to say both of them have had difficulty finding successful footing in their careers, especially in recent years, would be an understatement. Which is why, during the dozens of announcements we got during Disney's Investors Day at the end of 2020, I gravitated towards the announcement of this show. Yes, more than the 10 or so new Star Wars shows, because I'm a weirdo. Steve Martin, Martin Short, and Selena Gomez starring in what appears to be a murder mystery series was something that could either go really good or really bad. Luckily, it was the former. Did you hear that? That's my sigh of relief from a couple of months ago. Only Murders in the Building is one of those shows that doesn't sound that remarkable if you describe it, but it does everything so well that it becomes very above average, with our three leads running around trying to solve and somewhat profit off of a murder committed in their building, because they're gonna produce a true crime podcast about it. It's a great time. It's very entertaining all the way through, but as it goes on, we get to see the lives and differences of this unexpected but well-rounded team. Differences differences in generation, class, or in just the choices they've made in their lives. It really keeps you invested in the show beyond what's going on with the mystery, and as a fan of this genre, that's really important to me. But the mystery, oh my god. I'm not gonna spoil anything, I promise, but there are so many dramatic and ridiculous twists and turns in these 10 episodes that are so well executed they kept me on the edge of my seat until they cut to credits. Only Murders in the Building is the breakout hit its stars deserved. I feel like it's a show that flew kind of under the radar for most, but I am very glad the quality was recognized enough to have it keep going for a second season. If you haven't seen it yet, trust me, you were missing out. Go give it a watch. I cannot recommend it enough. Number 6. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. If there was one franchise that absolutely opened the floodgates this year, it was the Marvel Cinematic Universe. After over a year of the universe being put on hold, we were getting new installments almost every month this year, sometimes twice a month. And because this is the MCU, most of it was amazing. So to avoid repetition when I was putting this list together, I decided to confine myself to one movie and one of the new TV shows. Now, I'm sure a lot of people would put Spider-Man No Way Home as their top Marvel movie of the year, and I completely understand that. It was freaking fantastic, and I will talk about how great this movie is in the future. But for me, Shang-Chi ranked just a bit higher, because as I mentioned when I reviewed this movie, it's so well crafted, I struggled to find any major fault with it. It's a refreshingly original story with gorgeous settings, compelling character arcs, and a story that feels fresh for the MCU, yet slots so naturally into the already established world, to the point that it wouldn't be too hard to believe that this was planned to join the cinematic universe for many years, even though it wasn't. It demonstrates what the MCU can do best, knowing how to make the interconnectivity of its enormous universe feel like natural progression. So pulling off a completely new entry like this with such finesse is applause-worthy in my eyes. Not to mention having another big group of kids who get to see a superhero on the big screen who looks like them is just amazing and frankly overdue. Shang-Chi feels kind of like the Guardians of the Galaxy did when they joined the MCU, making a movie out of this character that outside of hardcore comic fans, no one really heard of or particularly cared about. For most franchises, this would be a risk, but with the investment provided by the script, world building, Cretton's direction, and Simu Liu's very memorable performance, Shang-Chi is very likely to follow alongside the Guardians to become a household name. We definitely need more heroes like Shang-Chi, and I sincerely hope his tenure in the MCU is long and thriving. Number 5. Shmigadoon. This really was the year of the musical, with movie musical adaptations of all kinds coming down the pipeline quicker than we could keep track of. If you're a musical theater nerd, this year was made for you. But then, almost out of nowhere, a wholly original, yet very familiar kind of musical came along, about an average couple who are having troubles with their relationship, who stumble across this magical town where life is a musical every day. This show was my summer. My mom and I were obsessed from the first note of the song that welcomes us to Shmigadoon. I swear, I think we've seen that first episode a dozen times at this point. There's just something so infectious about it, especially if you are a musical theater fan. From the fabulously catchy soundtrack, with a couple of new earworms every episode, ranging from energetic, to funny, to heartwarming, to the sincere story about the challenges that come with love of all kinds, and how much all that hard work can really be worth it to keep that love in your life, to the absolutely remarkable cast. Kristen Chenoweth, Aaron Tveit, Jane Krakowski, Ariana DeBose, freaking Alan Cumming, and so many more. This is how you cast a musical, Hollywood. This show showcases all the talent in its large cast, making the whole experience much more enjoyable as a result. The only major issue I had with Shmigadoon is that I wish it was longer. Not just because I wanted more, but because there are some things that feel like they could have used a couple more episodes to be fleshed out to their full potential, with some forgotten plot points and characters that were clearly meant to have more importance. And apparently the show was initially meant to be 8 episodes, but due to complications because of this freaking pandemic that just won't end, they had to cut it down to 6. Which is a shame, but Shmigadoon leaves a real impression with just those 6 episodes. It is a lovely love letter to all things classic musicals while incorporating modern ideas and themes. If you've seen the show, I highly recommend checking out Broadway by Ghostlight's episodic breakdowns for the show. It's a fantastic companion piece of the series and will show you just how much love and care went into this miniseries. Shmigadoon is an absolute delight and became the soundtrack of my summer. It solidified for me that this was indeed the year of the musical. So while we're on that topic, number 4. Come From Away. So remember last year when I talked about Hamilton and I was hoping that it would start a trend of other Broadway musicals doing professional recordings? Well, a couple stage shows this year did just that. Yay! Netflix got their own pro shot for a stage musical before it even debuted with Diana the Musical. Yeah. And over on Apple TV Plus, we had the pro shot of the hit Broadway show Come From Away. I think if there's one thing you should take away from this list, it's don't sleep on Apple TV Plus. I know it's annoying to have to pay for another streaming service, but I promise it's worth it. I'm really glad Come From Away made the cut for getting a pro shot. It's probably the best way to appreciate the talent that brings this show to life 8 shows a week, with a cast of a dozen actors playing dozens of characters, from the kind-hearted townsfolk of Gander to the hundreds of passengers on planes from all over the world that were rerouted to the small town in Newfoundland after the September 11th terrorist attacks. What I always loved about Come From Away is how down-to-earth it is. There are a lot of stories revolving around 9/11 from all sorts of angles, but this is the first story around it I've seen that is just about regular people caught in the middle of the aftermath trying to process it all, how it changes their lives and how it doesn't. With such a large cast of characters, you can encompass a lot of different reactions to the situation all these different people from all different backgrounds find themselves in. But the show's not a Les Mis style downer. It's a lot of fun at points too, and this pro shot made me realize just how funny this show could be. It's a story that's a great idea for a musical because the music and lyrics embody the wide range of emotion going on throughout this frantic yet quaint story. The soundtrack really takes you on an emotional journey, and getting to see these songs performed live, now preserved on film for all time, makes the journey even richer. It's strange for me to think that there's a chance some of you watching this video might not have been alive when this happened. To you, it's just a chapter in a textbook. If you want to understand what it was like for those who were around to process this tragedy, Come From Away is the perfect encapsulation of it all. From grief to confusion to coping to paranoia to spirituality to finding strength and community. Come From Away is a beautiful, heartfelt musical that is more than worthy of getting its own pro shot. Not just because it came out on the 20th anniversary of the September 11th attacks, but because it's a reminder of the goodness that can thrive even in times of crisis, what it means to reach out and be kind and generous, and how to celebrate our differences while acknowledging what we all have in common. Number 3. New Pokemon Snap. Yep, I threw in a video game because this is my list and I can do what I want. Besides, if I was gonna make an exception for any video game, it was gonna be for New Pokemon Snap. It might be tough for some younger fans to understand this, but the original Pokemon Snap on the Nintendo 64 was a huge hit, with an unexpectedly charming concept that took you through the Pokemon world outside of the realm of battling, which was a rare occurrence at the time. It captured the hearts of early Pokemaniacs for a generation. But even though it was popular, there was never a follow-up to this game. Despite massive fan demand and how many Pokemon spin-off games tend to get sequels of some sort, it never happened for Snap. For a long time, it seemed like Pokemon Snap would remain a relic of the past. I'd given up on the possibility of another game by the time they had announced out of nowhere that there would at long last be a new Pokemon Snap on the Nintendo Switch. As you might expect, people went nuts, including me. I can safely say this game was worth the wait. New Pokemon Snap really feels like coming home to a beloved childhood experience, with the advancements in gaming there have been in the last 2 decades only improving the adventure. Even though Pokemon Snap was popular and very replayable, it was a fairly short game. If you tried hard enough, you could beat the whole thing in an afternoon. Now with over 700 new Pokemon to choose from, the game is not nearly as limited on content. One of my favorite additions is how the Pokemon's behavior changes when you revisit certain maps with new achievements. It ups the challenge and replayability of the game immensely. I can't tell you how many times I've played through a map just to get an amazing shot of one Pokemon, and it was great. Coming back to the world of Pokemon photography felt just as good as I imagined it would. I was reliving those times as a kid, staying up late into the night, racing through levels over and over, trying to get that one perfect shot. It's a gorgeous and fun game that delivered just the experience I've been wanting again since I was 7 years old. I feel like I needed this game as much as people needed Animal Crossing New Horizon in 2020. You know what I mean? It was just nice and relaxing and nostalgic, and I'm probably going to play it for several more hours in the future. Number 2. WandaVision. Even if this is the number 2 spot, I'm going to keep this entry brief for reasons. WandaVision was the big return to the MCU after its forced 18-month hiatus, and if you ask me, they couldn't have come back with anything better. Because WandaVision was unlike anything we'd seen from the MCU before. Not just that it was the first Marvel TV show for Disney+, but taking place in this surreal sitcom world, unraveling the deeper mystery behind the circumstances that led to this world being created is some of the most compelling stuff Marvel Studios has ever produced. It's no wonder the show took the world by storm and has been nominated for several awards this year. We were starved for Marvel content, and they responded by giving us a gourmet meal, yet only telling us one ingredient of the recipe at a time over the course of 2 months. It was unique, familiar, and solidified the Disney Plus miniseries as a worthwhile and viable approach to expanding on the already massive Marvel Cinematic Universe. The rest of the Marvel shows we've gotten so far certainly have their strengths, but I don't envy any of them for having to go on after this. WandaVision was just so good, and it kicked off this year in entertainment with a bang. Before we get to number 1, let's go over a few honorable mentions. The Dig. This might be a silly one, but it was the first new release I saw in 2021, and it still managed to stick with me. It's a quiet little movie in the English countryside right before World War II, about love and archaeology and the fragility and perseverance of life, and it totally won me over. You want a laid-back but emotional film? Give it a watch. The Owl House Season 2. Trust me when I say the only thing that kept this from making the list is that we only got about half the season this year. But what we have gotten so far has been an absolutely remarkable follow-up to Season 1. I have been giving my first impressions on every episode of Season 2 over on my Patreon, and rest assured, we will be doing some episodic reviews of Season 2 of The Owl House when we wrap up on the DuckTales reviews. Doctor Who Series 13, Flux. It's weird, I think Series 13 of Doctor Who was better than Series 12, yet this season only made my honorable mentions. Shows you how good the rest of the year was. Doctor Who Flux was a very experimental season that stumbled a bit towards the end, but gets a lot right to make up for it. It was an ambitious approach to a season that I hope the show tries again someday. And if you want more details on my thoughts on Doctor Who Flux, again, I have covered every episode on the Patreon, and will do so for the 2022 specials as well. My Little Pony, A New Generation. Despite my deep affection for Friendship is Magic, or possibly because of that, I was not expecting to enjoy this movie as much as I did. But G5 of My Little Pony is off to a solid start, introducing us to this next generation while being influenced a lot by what came before, with gorgeous animation, a fabulous cast, and catchy songs littered throughout. I can't wait to see more. If this is anything to go by, maybe we'll see ponies on the list properly next year. The Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. This really was my year for video games. As a budding Phoenix Wright fan in 2014, I was really excited for The Great Ace Attorney when it was announced, but due to how much difficulty there was getting it localized, like with Pokemon Snap, I didn't think I was ever going to get to play it. So you can imagine how much I was screaming when we finally got an English release announced this year. Funnily enough, the thing that I was most excited for in this game is, allegedly, what prevented it from being localized for so long.
So then, let us unravel this mystery.
My man. I could say so much about this character, who is totally not Sherlock Holmes, but I'm not going to, but I totally could. I'm just really, really hyped about this whole game. Now, I'm only on the second case because, well, as you can probably guess from my video output, I've been really busy lately. It's fresh and familiar and as ridiculous as you expect an Ace Attorney game to be, and I love it. I can't wait to play the rest. And now, we've reached the big moment. My number one favorite piece of entertainment from 2021 is Tick, Tick, Boom. This wasn't as easy a choice as it was last year. I didn't think I had one piece of media that stood out among all the great stuff we got this year. But as I was deciding the rankings, I kept coming back to the idea of this movie being my number one, and it just didn't fit anywhere else. Like I've kept saying, this was the year of the musical, which meant that some musicals stood out more than others. In the Heights, West Side Story, Dear Evan Hansen, stuff like that. In that context, Tick, Tick, Boom almost felt like a footnote. A B-tier musical trying to compete with the higher profile ones we were getting this year. But now that it's out there, it's so much more than that. Audience members, myself included, were immediately swept away into the tale of this starving, eccentric artist who the movie tells us right away won't live to see his greatest achievements. First off, the movie adaptation of this musical walks the fine line of grounding the material for film while keeping the fantastical elements provided by the music, and even using the medium of film to elevate the fantasy into something truly remarkable to watch. The cast is phenomenal, with the standout of course being Andrew Garfield in one of the best performances of his career, and the soundtrack is absolutely stunning. I don't have any opinion on the very controversial Rent, but if its music is anything like the songs in this movie, I totally get why it still has diehard fans. There's a lot to praise about Tick, Tick, Boom as a movie and a musical, but there was something else about it that really resonated with a lot of people, and that comes down to the subject matter. As friend of the channel, Wait in the Wings, pointed out in his very excellent video about this film, Lin-Manuel Miranda is one of the biggest stars out there. He could do pretty much anything he wanted to right now, and he has. This year alone has been flooded with his content. But for his first shot at directing, he chose to tell this story, and there's a reason for that. Well, it probably helps that it's another story about a man obsessed with legacy and making his mark. You could probably write an essay about Lin-Manuel Miranda's obsession with mortality in his work. But it's that very pressure that's felt as Jonathan is trying to make his mark. That desire to achieve something that will last a lifetime before he hits the dreaded age of 30. That's what sticks with people so much about this story. It's something that everyone can relate to, especially if you're in a similar situation to Jonathan's. I will be 30 in 19 months. Not that I'm counting. I have a low-level retail job in a small town. I still live with my parents, who I love, but it's not exactly something to be proud of. And oh yeah, we're entering our third year of a global pandemic. I'm not lucky enough or talented enough to be successful at something I do love doing, creative stuff like this. And I probably never will be. And yeah, that's discouraging. But Tick, Tick, Boom shows that it's just as discouraging for those who do have that talent, but why it's important to keep going after rejection, stagnation, or just the weight of general inadequacy. Because for many, creativity is where their passion lies, where fulfillment is felt the most. Amidst the struggle, outreach, and if you're lucky, reward, at the heart of it all, it can be what makes people feel alive. Like they're offering something important and that they're leaving a part of themselves behind, which is sometimes the best solace to find in that constant tick of the clock we all feel deep down. Tick, Tick, Boom isn't a flashy spectacle of a musical, but is a top-tier credit to its genre. It's a film that's going to speak to artists down the generations, much like how Stephen Sondheim inspired Jonathan Larson, and Larson inspired Miranda. That alone is what makes the pursuit of creativity worth it. It's always worth it. I know that's what I'm going to keep doing, because this is what I love. This year was an amazing one for entertainment, and with any luck, the next will bring even more great stories and adventures to our big and small screens. Thanks for watching, everyone. Definitely let me know what your favorite entertainment of 2021 was in the comments below. That's why the series is called Let's Talk About. I want to give a very special thanks to my patrons who help support my content, including David L. Sproul, Sebastian Canito of Shmigadoon Reviews, Chelsea A. Crandall, Hawk Hero, Crowless, Jinx Productions, and Wait in the Wings. If you'd like to join these fine people in supporting my content while getting cool exclusive perks, you can check out my Patreon page at the link in the description, as well as my other social media if you'd like to check out any of those. Thank you so much again for watching, and I will see you guys next time.